Where are you now? I'm just debating whether or not to do that tomorrow. I'm thinking still be best for me to take this thing tomorrow because I got to be down here right in the middle of rush hour. I mean, I just think that right is dissect. Yeah. That's no problem. That's all right, listen, you have fun tonight. I'll see you when you get home. All right. Love you. Yo, yo.
Yep.
You want to bring Will up real quick so we can you can get the levels all smoothed out. Hello, 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 hello.
Hi.
Do you hear me well?
I hear you fantastic.
Okay, yeah, you sound. Are you on an Ethernet or are you on a hotspot?
Ethernet.
Yeah.
Ethernet.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right, so I'll open it up and go over things here, set the stage for tomorrow with the Gamecocks finally getting here. In fact, I think they're already here. I saw the plane went down to Myrtle Beach to pick up Muschamp. I think he was vacationing down at Pauley's this week, and the plane flew from Myrtle Beach to Peachtree DeKalb Airport. So I think the Gamecocks are here.
Cool.
And took care of Bill. I sent him all the Missouri people and pictures, so he should be taken care of. We'll talk a lot. The issues here, you got your issue with Fedora here. Saban brought up the scheduling philosophy and playing tougher schedules. And then it was an answer to a question about UCF and how does a school like UCF get in the playoffs. So we'll go into that.
You want me to throw to the Fedora right out of my comments here?
Yeah, I mean, if that's part of what you're going to say and it's a natural lead into it, sure. Just have Brian on standby.
That's why I'm saying it now so that Brian hears it.
Make sure he's on the same page.
Cool.
Brian, did you hear that?
Yeah, sir.
Okay. I mean, Brian, he could have been down to the bathroom for all we know.
I took care of that.
He does like to take bathroom breaks.
Did you see the ACC cookies? Very smart.
Yes, I figured if there was food anywhere in the neighborhood that you would be drooling over it.
Well, the thing about it is the dinner goes from 6 until 9, and this room is slowly dwindling, if you know what I mean. So
we're always the last ones. Okay, let me let you go. Hey, Brian, put me down in queue, and I'll give you Coach DeBerry's number.
Okay.
You ready?
All right, you're in queue.
719-243.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. 719-243-4212. Seven 243-4212. Want to call him at 718.
All right, I got it.
It's time for the final word in sports all across the state. You're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts, Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
And good evening, everybody. Welcome back into Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network, as we continue with our coverage of SEC Media Days. And we welcome in the good boys from the ACC as ACC Media Days in Charlotte got underway today as well. We've got that covered for you right here on Sports Talk, unlike anybody else in the world. Nobody else is covering SEC and ACC Media Days like we are here on Sports Talk. Phil Kornblut in Atlanta, Will Pelagic in Charlotte, the Professor Tom Hayes in Columbia. I know you've heard a lot of football talk over the last 24, 48, 30, 48 hours, maybe even more than that. Any thoughts you have about what you've heard? Questions about tomorrow with USC here and Clemson there? We'll be happy to take those on from you tonight. 800-956-7266 is the number. Give us a call. Email talkback@sportstalksc.com and on Twitter at SportsTalkSC. So here in Atlanta today, we finally had somebody here worth listening to, and that was Nick Saban. Not to slide anybody else. I mean, Chad Morris was interesting, and Jimbo Fisher was good, and I'm sure anybody who is a fan of a school who's come through, I've already offended. But you did have Nick Saban here today, and when the Sabanator's in town, when he talks, people stand up and listen, and he made a point at the end of his comments today about football scheduling that we'll get into in just a little bit. Jeremy Pruitt taking over at Tennessee. He was here today. Joe Moorhead, new coach at Mississippi State, was here today. And, of course, the always affable and exciting Barry Odom from Missouri. But I got to tell you what, Will, after looking at Missouri and what they've got coming back and looking at Drew Lock and the numbers he put up last year, 44 touchdowns, with some of the other talent they've got, I got to kind of rethink my opinion about the Tigers going into this season. They could be a little tougher out than I gave them credit.
You do realize that most of that last bit of the schedule came against Idaho, UConn, a down Florida team, a down Tennessee team, Vanderbilt, and Arkansas.
Still counts.
Teams,
they still
a couple of those teams had fired coaches too. I mean,
yeah.
Listen, Missouri. I don't want to sit here and say that I'm down, but the one thing that they don't do, Corn, is they don't play any defense. And I think, Missouri looked very, very poor on defense against South Carolina in the second week of the season. I know they get them a little bit later on than they did last year, but, October 6th, I think that game at Williams-Brice Stadium, South Carolina will be coming off of a big emotional game, at least against Kentucky, maybe possibly a victory against Kentucky. Maybe there's a letdown in there if they can maybe beat the 4-game losing streak. But I think, Missouri comes into that game off a bye. I still like South Carolina in that football game.
Yeah, I've got to listen to the Gamecocks tomorrow. I got to get some Will Muschamp in me to kind of refresh my opinion of a 9 or 10 win season, because after looking at some of their opponents a little more closely and seeing who they are bringing back, and I mean, you got to really consider when you talk about the top quarterbacks pro in the SEC for this coming season. You got to talk about, of course, Jake Bentley. You got to talk about Jake Fromm. You got to talk about Drew Lock. You got to talk about whoever the quarterback's going to be at Alabama. And Nick Saban said today, he was asked a question, do you think that Jalen Hurts is going to be there in 47 days when you play your opener against Louisville? And he said he didn't know. I mean, he wants him to be there, and he hopes he's there. But the question was, from the standpoint of if Jalen Hurts is not the starting quarterback, is he going to bolt the program?
I don't think he'll bolt the program. The big key is, I think, probably what people were talking about when his dad was talking. I think is the same things that keeps him there. He's got to stay the course. And I think his father will tell him the same thing. You got to stay the course and things will come your way. Just watch out. It was interesting. Everybody started talking about Tua, and was the first thing he does in spring was to break his hand. So you never know what's going to happen in football. you may be the second rung one week, but then the top rung the next week.
Well, Saban created most of the news here today by talking about that and talking about his wishes for future scheduling, and we'll get into that. But I think the coach that made the most news anywhere in the country, Will, was right there with you in Charlotte.
He was, and many people are wondering whether or not Larry Fedora is going to be committed to an insane asylum today, because he made some very outlandish comments when it comes to talking about the validity of whether or not CTE is caused by football playing. He also made some comments about the possible downturn of football as it's related to American patriotism. I'll let you be the judge of what he had to say.
You know, I do believe we're involved in the greatest game there is on earth. I really do. And I do believe it's what makes our country so great. And I'm passionate about that. And the things that we change year in and year out and tweaking the game for player safety, all of those things, I think are good for the game. And I said it in there. I think the game is safer right now than it's ever been in the history of the game. That doesn't mean you're going to eliminate all the injuries. It's not possible. But the game is better than it's ever been. And I believe the game's under attack right now. I really do. And if we're not careful, we're going to lose what the game is all about. I think we will lose as a nation. I think we'll lose a lot because I think what the game teaches, I think we'll lose so much of that. I really do. Again, I think that's one of the things that makes us such a great nation. I fear that the game will get pushed so far to one extreme that you won't recognize the game 10 years from now. That's what I worry about. And I do believe that if it gets to that point, that our country goes down too. I blame a groundswell of data that is tweaked one way or the other, because I can take the data and I can make it look one way. You can take the data and make it look another way. And whoever's presenting it is the one that gets to say so. And, are there some things that are negative about the game? Yeah, there's no doubt about that. But again, I think as you look over time, I can tell you just in my lifetime, from when I played the game early on to where we are today, here's a huge difference in the way the game is played and the way athletes are taken care of.
Some of the things he said, guys, were fair, but I think a lot of the other stuff is, as my friend Cosmo Kramer would call it, kooky talk. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's necessarily helpful for the way for where the game is right now.
Does that mean that when football goes out, apple pie won't taste the same either? He seemed to be saying everything else. But I will say this. If you're Larry Fedora and you're coming off a 3-9 season, only one ACC win against, I believe it was Pittsburgh, and you're in a basketball university, sometimes you say strange things just to get some attention.
Well, he got plenty of that because it was popping up all over Twitter. And you know how people on Twitter reacted to that, as Will did at the outset of the comments there. I mean, they look at him as being, a nutty cake, fruit cake there. Anytime you try to mix philosophy with football and politics and the health of the nation and the nation moving forward and the future of the country and all that, I'm not so sure that's a good recipe.
No. And again, I'm not even getting into the political part of it. I'm more mad about him saying that CTE is a made-up thing. I mean, Look at Dave Durson. Look at some of these other players, Junior Seau, who have had unfortunate incidents as a result of playing football. Don't sit here and tell me that CTE is not a real thing and that it's not caused by football. And a lot of the stuff that has happened throughout the game's history and the recent history of it and the rule changes that have been made, I think are good for the sport.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, they're moving the rules in the right direction. In fact, the head of the SEC officials met with us the other day to show us some of the changes. And one rule that I liked has to do with at the line of scrimmage, and that is you can't cut block a defensive lineman who makes his way into the offensive backfield. You can't cut block him at the knees anymore. That's going to be a penalty, and I think that's a very good rule because it's going to save that guy's knees. And we got to save knees, and we got to save brains to save the game. There's no other way to look at it. All right, we'll have more from here in Atlanta. We got the coaches here. Will's got coaches with him there, and your phone calls as well. Back in a moment here on Sports Talk. So, and so you take it back and reset. You take it back. So you take it back and reset. And I'll pitch for the calls and anybody holding, Brian?
No, nobody's holding.
There are none. Then we'll go to have Saban ready. Saban, so we can talk about his thoughts afterwards. How's it sounding from here?
Sounds good.
Yeah, I got to. I'm glad I called because see, I'm buying this data package from T-Mobile. That's what I have at T-Mobile. So 1 gig for 7 days is $10, and I guess that's high speed because everything is working great. I'm at 4G and everything is moving great. But when I called, it said I had used up my high speed gigs, I guess. I don't know what you call them, and I had to replenish it. So I guess I used a gig of it last night, I guess. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's easy to use those. Easy to use that.
I thought a gig would be a lot.
Or not when you're streaming.
Well, we're not streaming video. That's the key thing. We're not streaming video. If it goes out, I've got my phone standing by. I can switch over to. I'm going to put the hotspot on that. Have that running. I've got LTE. LTE is actually faster than 4G, is it not?
Yeah, it is.
But I'm wondering if.
Will is sending you a message right now.
Yeah, I've got it open. But I'm thinking that the hotspot, we get better quality using this hotspot than we do using my phone hotspot, LTE. What do you think? Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Because your phone's still kind of pulling from that internet.
Well, I'm not using Wi-Fi now. When I go to my hotspot, I'm pulling off of the Sprint system.
Oh.
So I don't know. Just if you hear me,
magic to me, man.
if you hear it starting to go bad here on this end, if it starts to garble out or something, let me know and I'll switch it over to my phone hotspot. I've got it cranked up and ready to go. And see, and I have, I have. You with me?
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
Our dueling coverage of Media Days continues here on Sports Talk. If you have a question about the Larry Fedora comments or response, rebuttal from it, the comments that basically say the downfall of football will lead to the downfall of our country et al., along with also some of the comments that we heard from Nick Saban, which we'll play for you in a moment. You can join us 800-956-7266 at SportsTalkSC on Twitter. And just to kind of transpose, Corn, the feel here in SEC, while the talk there is scheduling outside of what Larry Fedora had to say, I think the issue here in Charlotte, and that I've heard echoed not just among Commissioner Swafford when he spoke earlier today, but some of the other coaches, the real big issue now is whether or not the rise, prominence, and sustained success of Clemson is good for the league. There's the old saying, the rising tide lifts all boats, but I just don't know if the gap has closed enough to where you can pick anybody other than Clemson as a unanimous odds-on pick to win this conference outright.
Funny, I didn't hear that kind of comments when Florida State was dominating the league and winning championship after championship in the ACC.
Not disagreeing with you in that regard. It's just for some people they feel a little bad seeing the orange and regalia up top instead of maybe some other shade of red or gold.
Yeah, I'm sure. And listen, I mean, I think people like greatness. I don't think people like mediocrity. I don't think people are crazy about parity. I think they like greatness in all their sports and in their individuals as well. So if Clemson, Alabama, Oklahoma, Ohio State, maybe Washington, and maybe maybe Southern Cal this year, whoever it is that rises above, I mean, and if they keep it there, I mean, that's to their credit, and it's up to everybody else to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps and get to that level, because right now it does not appear in any form that Clemson or Alabama in particular are backing up. And Ohio State, of course, looks very strong once again. Oklahoma, we'll see what happens with their quarterback situation, but they could be right back there in it too. So you could very well be looking at the potential of the same four teams in the playoffs from last year, and nobody will be surprised about that. But, the question was raised to Nick Saban today about that. And it was asked in the form of, what do you think about Central Florida going undefeated but not being in the playoffs and not having a chance to play for the national championship? That was a question that he was asked toward the end of this segment we're going to bring you. The first part of this segment, we pick it up where he's asked a question about how much longer he's going to coach. It was pointed out that Steve Spurrier was the only coach in the history of the SEC to coach after the age of 70. Saban was asked, do you plan to continue coaching long enough to be coaching at Alabama in the SEC into your 70s?
Well, let me say this. Miss Terry does not want me at home. I can tell you that. She doesn't care if I'm 60, 70, or 80. So she's looking for something for me to do. Now, I really enjoy what I'm doing right now, and as long as I'm healthy and I can do it, I'm going to continue to do it and not worry about any numbers or what my age is or anything like that. But I would not want to be in the position where I ever rode the program down because I wasn't capable of making a contribution that would be positive to the success of the program. So I'm going to continue to do this for as long as I feel like I can make a positive contribution, and as long as I feel healthy enough to do it. And, our noontime basketball team was undefeated again this year, so that's always an indicator to me that I could make it through another season.
I think it's 47 days until the opener, kind of late in the off season. Do you expect Jalen to be on the roster on opening day or with the team?
I don't know if I can't tell. Can you repeat that question? Because I can't.
He's asking 47 days till the opening game. Do you expect Jalen to be on the roster?
Well, I have no idea. I expect him to be there. I think it's our job to give both players a very fair opportunity to have a chance to win the team at their position. I think that one of the two guys, obviously, both are capable. We'll create a role for one or both of those guys on our team, and they'll all have to make a decision based on what that outcome is as to what their future is, at Alabama. We certainly would love for every player on our team to stay at the University of Alabama and graduate. Jalen has a great opportunity to do that in December. So we are hopeful that he will stay there and be a graduate regardless of what his circumstance is as a player. But that's not to minimize his chances of being a starter and making a great contribution to our team in some way, even if he isn't a starter, be able to do that.
Do you ever feel for a school like UCF that can run the table and not get a sniff of the national playoff? And what do you think it would take for a group of 5 team to get into the national playoff?
I've always been an advocate of playing all Power 5 schools. I think we need to have more really, really good games, on TV for the players. We can't have fans who pay a lot of money for tickets and boxes and loges who support our programs to pay for games that no one's interested in watching. That's now, I heard Greg talk about the fact that we don't want to play 9 SEC games, but I've always been an advocate of playing 9 or 10 SEC games and a couple other games against some other good opponents that everybody would be happy to watch. I think it would help us determine, to your next question, who should be in the playoffs. You might not have to go undefeated to get into playoffs because there would be more games against high-quality opponents, which would help determine who the best teams are. And look, I have tremendous amount of compassion for UCF and what they accomplished this year in going undefeated. We've only had one team that's gone undefeated and won the national championship, and that was in 2009. And that is very, very, very difficult to do for anyone. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for the players. I'm not responsible for the system that determines who gets in the playoffs. But I think they did a good job of determining who got in the playoffs. And we can have another discussion about the future of the playoffs and how many teams should get in the playoffs. But you're going to minimize the effect of bowl games, which I stood up here 10 years ago and said, as soon as we do this, it's going to diminish bowl games, the importance of bowl games. Everybody would just be interested in the playoffs. Well, that's where we are right now. I mean, we have players choosing not to play in bowl games because it's not important, because they're going to save themselves for the draft. All these things are not good for college football. So there's a lot of philosophical questions that everybody needs to sort of take into consideration as what the best way to do this whole thing is. And I don't think I have the answer to that. That's not what I get paid to do. And I can't tell you how or why or if they should have gotten in the playoffs relative to UCF.
Words from Nick Saban earlier today here at SEC Media Days. Food for thought there. And I mean, listen, with a playoff now, all the bowls are going to be damaged except for those involved in the semifinals. Everybody else is just an exhibition game. We all know that. It's a chance for the players to be rewarded supposedly for a successful season. Maybe it's a chance for fans to go somewhere and enjoy an area of the country they haven't been to before. But there's a lot of redundancy as we're seeing now in the bowl scheduling too. Teams are going back to the same bowl game in consecutive years or 3 times in 4 years, and it's kind of turning off a lot of the fans. So, I mean, the bowls are going to suffer as long as there's any type of playoff format in place, no matter how you tweak it.
Well, the weirdest thing, Corn, is that he's talking about playing all Power 5 teams. That doesn't help UCF any. UCF's not a Power 5 team. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, in that regard, right, how does that help UCF? It doesn't help UCF.
Well, I think when he said Power 5, I think he was thinking not just Power 5, but the top schools from the group of 5 as well, which would include a Central Florida, and just getting rid of the FCS teams on your schedule, because those are the games he's talking about that aren't competitive and that really nobody pays attention to and nobody wants to see. We'll pick back up on this, and we've got more from Will in Charlotte coming up in a moment. Okay. Brian, everything looking okay?
Yeah, everything's good.
Okay. Oh, oh.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network, and this is one I've been looking forward to all week. Head coach Duke, David Cutcliffe, joins us here off of a 7-6 season. This is the rotational cross-division opponent of the Clemson Tigers coming up this season. And, Coach, I guess I'll start right out there. You get a chance to take a crack at the big dog with Clemson there at the end of the year, November 17th. Could be a game that's big for both. What are your thoughts on the emergence of what they've had happen in their team?
Well, Dabo's a long-time friend. We're both Alabamians, so our history is pretty vast. And so I'm very proud of what he's accomplished and what they've done. And certainly in every big game as an ACC guy, pulled hard for them. I think it's been great what they've pushed a lot of institutions into committing to football. Mm-hmm. So, November is, I have an old saying, they remember what you do in November. And they do in college football. It's where bowls are decided, and it's where championships are decided. And it's a great opportunity for us because it's the best program right now in the conference. And but you don't know what circumstances are going to be when you get there. Mm-hmm. One way or the other, whether we're winning a lot or whether we've battled through a year, we know that that's a good mark and a test for us. So it's going to be a good experience for our players.
I'm going to ask you one more about them. I don't want to get to your ball club just because there is a little bit of a quarterback quandary. I'm not going to call it a controversy. In your studies, you're a quarterback guru as it is. What do you see on film when you look at a guy like Trevor Lawrence?
Well, we watched him in high school young, and I did watch the spring game online. And, he's big, he's strong, he looks fearless. He was accurate with the ball in that game. But, don't count Bryant out. It's an interesting thing to have had experience. And college football is different than high school football in a big way. You're working against everybody you're working against is a major college player. In high school, you may see, 10 of those guys in a season. So it'll be unique for anybody to just step in and dominate a league.
David Cutcliffe's Duke program, 7-6 a year ago, an appearance in the Quick Lane Bowl against Northern Illinois. How do you feel about your ball club?
This should be our best team because we're better on defense. We got a quarterback coming back, it's a 3-year starter. I like the people skill-wise around him. The best defensive front we've had. Everybody rightfully so talks about Clemson's front, and people realize just how important defensive fronts are to success in college football. And this has by far and away will be our best. Our linebackers are terrific, and I think anytime you're that good on defense, you got a chance to be consistently in a ball game. I'm excited.
And certainly, you mentioned your quarterback, Daniel Jones, who goes into his third year. They always say that the quarterback third year is always kind of the biggest one. Why is that?
Well, I think this game is harder. It's just what I just mentioned about the Clemson quarterback circumstance. There's no lesson like play in the game, and I'm going to make you think a minute. But in college football practice setup, and it's all right because it's for the safety of the player, a quarterback will get probably 200 less live snaps in practice than what they used to get. You're not playing many games in practice. So having to simulate a game is hard. So after a guy's played 2 years, that kind of confidence and that kind of you can't, nobody can give you that. He's earned that confidence because he's been through everything by then.
What does it mean to you to bring in a school like Army to lead off the school here?
They're really good. They won 10 games a year ago, won their bowl game. You know, that's because they're an option team. Ask Clemson if they like playing Georgia Tech every year as a crossover. You know, it's challenging to open with an option team. So I have that concern, but it's also going to make us tougher. So I'm hoping the benefits of this are going to be outstanding.
Yeah, and you have Georgia Tech later on in the year as you go into that October point, but you got to get through Northwestern and Baylor. What was your philosophy? I don't know if you meant to do this with the 2 road games like that, but what was your philosophy in playing those 2 out-of-conference road games right off the bat like that?
Well, it just fell that way because they couldn't and we couldn't set it up any differently. We had both of them at home last year. Thank goodness we were fortunate enough to beat both of them. I think it's a great test for our team. You know, when you go on the road against good people early, you got 4 conference games every year on the road. Think about it. If you become a great road team, you got a chance to win a division championship. And if you do that, you got a chance to be a conference champion.
Of course, you know, your receiving core, a part of what makes the quarterback good is the receiving core. You return your top 3 ball catchers from a year ago, and TJ obviously one of the most accomplished in the conference at that level. What do you like about what he has playing around him, Daniel Jones does?
Yeah, well, TJ's got incredible short space quickness, and he's got dependable veteran people that are going to be where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there, the timing mechanism. We got 2 senior tight ends that are just terrific, big situational players. And the best friend of quarterback, I've always told Peyton and Eli this, best friend a quarterback can have is a good run game. So I think our running backs have a chance to be really good, better than people might think. Now, all falls back to none of it worth the darn if our offensive front doesn't have a really good year.
Your relationship, we'll talk with David Cutcliffe, head coach at Duke. Your relationship with the Manning family is highly chronicled, and I know that they're probably limited on what they can say about you toward a certain player, but what is it like being able to kind of call upon their experience and even have them see what some of your players have to offer?
Well, my respect for them goes way beyond the football field. And also, I think probably just you'd have to understand how much I trust and love both of them. And so when they speak, I listen. I think that the respect and love has been mutual through the years. People wonder why we stay so connected. And I think the biggest part is we're all looking for people in our lives that we can trust. And I trust those 2, well, the whole family, I should say. Absolutely at 1,000%.
You mentioned this earlier, and this is something that Commissioner Swafford talked about in his remarks earlier this morning, but you know, the old saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. You mentioned Clemson's success. How much of that is evident, and how much of that have you noticed, the fact that like you said, they've caused a lot of schools, and your school obviously prominent basketball success, some football success as well, but obviously have caused a lot more to care more about football?
Well, I'm going into my 11th ACC season as a head coach, and I've seen significant change. Started with the conference emphasis. Clemson's success has challenged everybody in our league. I mean, you know, Florida State got used to dominating for a while. It was a nemesis to Clemson, and I love the fact that it's kind of gone through a cycle. Miami has had incredible recent rich traditions. Virginia Tech. I mean, look at our league and go find you an easy ball game. Doesn't exist, and I think it's got to be top to bottom the most consistent league in the country.
Last one for you. Your biggest challenge you think you guys will have to overcome when it comes to success in 2018?
It's getting the offensive line playing at a special level. And that Jim Bridge has done a great job, our offensive line coach, and some of those young people are some of the best people I know, but we got to play well there. We've had too many issues. The other part of it is getting our specialists. I can tell you this, unless you got an outstanding punting game or a place kicking game, you're not going to be a championship football team. But we got to be consistent there.
Duke head coach David Cutcliffe. I feel like I could sit here and talk football with you for hours, but we are unfortunately out of time. Thank you so much for yours, and we appreciate you.
Well, all the good folks in South Carolina, I hope they know how much we appreciate them. It's a great border. And I think the Panthers, and this, I'm hearing a lot from this new owner, I think the Panthers have done a good job embracing. It's the Carolina Panthers. That's pretty cool.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you.
That's David Cutcliffe, head coach of the Duke Blue Devils. Back with more from ACC and SEC Media Days in a moment on Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network.
All right, very good, very good. Oh, what's happening? Just sitting here doing my thing. No, we don't do Radio Row, man. That's like $500, $600 now to do Radio Row. Well, what's his name told me more like 1,000. I mean, we didn't even look into it because it doesn't work for us because we do a night show. We don't have any live guests, so we're not going to spend the money. So I just find me a spot, get my hot spot going, and voila.
So you guys are on right now?
Yeah. I'm going to break. I'm going to break. I saw your stuff from up in Boston. Wasn't that you? One of the Boston?
Oh, with Jackie?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I usually.
I don't like that because I don't like the Red Sox.
It's all right. We usually like one Boston team. We'll work on it.
Yeah, I like the Celtics. Yeah.
We'll work on it. Yeah, so I go back vacation-wise, and we'll just put credentials in, and
that's great.
Someone from my college will bring a camera out, put the flag stick on, and good to go because there's no way to watch it.
Who's with you? Got it with you. Tell them I said hello. Momentarily.
Yeah, we're live.
We're live.
I'm live.
Have you already done, Mike?
I just went at 5, and now I just got to do one at 10. I'm going to do 6.
And Muschamp tomorrow morning at 10:30.
Hey, really can't wait to talk to him. Is that the river or is that poolside?
That's poolside. Yeah.
So do I have to contact that guy? Do you think I'll be fine if I just show up?
Now, I asked him, he said, meet at the elevators downstairs about 10:15.
Oh, if you don't have a hotel.
You don't have a hotel. I'm not staying here either. I'm staying at my daughter's house.
10:15.
So he said about 10:15, and he'll take a group of us up.
That's not a bad pay for it. They would stay in the air. That's pay for that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. See you guys tomorrow.
Hey, where we going now?
Let's see. Will bring it back, and let me look at let's see what we got planned here. We already did Saban, so why don't we drop in? We'll move Jeremy Pruitt up to here. No, I'll tell you what. We won't. We'll just talk here. We'll just talk about issues.
Okay.
And I'll do recruiting. We'll talk here about issues, and I'll do recruiting. Reset, and then
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network as we continue here on Wednesday. We're, of course, talking mostly SEC, ACC Media Day stuff. We'll take your phone calls, 800-956-7266, South Carolina and Clemson, who will both speak tomorrow at both. We've been talking about what's going on with the SEC scheduling. It's funny, listening to what Cutcliffe had to say, Corn, about Clemson's quarterback situation, and even thinking back to what Dabo Swinney said yesterday at his golf tournament, the thought of playing two quarterbacks almost kind of remains more intriguing, just because of the fact that, you have the experience of Bryant, you have what Trevor brought to the table. I just don't know if playing both is the best modus operandi, and I keep leaning on that experience versus obviously the upside that Trevor brings to the table. I'm wondering just exactly how this can be handled by at least Clemson in the right manner.
It's a delicate situation, I would say, in terms of keeping everybody together and supportive. The coaches to this point are saying the right thing. The coaches are saying that the players want the best player to play, and they want to be behind that guy, whether it's Kelly Bryant or Trevor Lawrence. I find it interesting. One of the barometers of what's happening at Clemson and around the program is Tiger Illustrated. There's no question about that. And since yesterday, the stories that have come out from Dabo Swinney and the press gathering there have been two pictures of Trevor Lawrence on their front page, not a picture of Kelly Bryant, as they have written stories about the team and about the quarterback situation. It just must, and that's just a decision that they've made, of course, to go with that. I'm just saying, if you're trying to get a read on what the attitude is around Clemson, that's as good a place as any. Also, TigerNet as well. Those are two great places to go and look and see how the fan base and the people who are up there every day around the program are looking at things. I just found it interesting that in the stories about the quarterback situation up there, they posted pictures of Lawrence and not Kelly Bryant to go with their story. So just something I'm taking away from that.
I'm calling him Trevor Sassoon now because of the hair, like Vidal Sassoon.
Yeah, I'll go back to what I said before. I thought Florida handled Chris Leak and Tim Tebow as best they could, and it worked out because Tebow had all the controls after Chris Leak he graduated, and you go from there. But they eased Tebow in, and he had little bad moments when he was in the football game during those years. As far as Clemson is concerned, I think they have a veteran offensive line that can block for either quarterback and can shift on the fly depending on who's under center or who's taking the shotgun snap. Because I also think it also makes every opponent you play have to waste time working on the other quarterback, because they're thinking that both are going to play. And now you got the defense coordinator figuring out what to do and what plans to have against both quarterbacks instead of just focusing on one.
I want to go back to what Saban was saying earlier in the show about scheduling and the playoffs and all of that. And, I mean, I really couldn't agree with him more when he said, look, I'm in favor of playing 9, even 10 SEC games. Now, you look at Alabama's schedule. They've got the Citadel in November. Who wants to see Alabama play the Citadel in late November before they play their rivalry game with Auburn? They've got a game against Arkansas State as well. Now, they do play Louisville at a neutral site to open the season, and that's the kind of game he's talking about. Why not? I don't understand the reluctance of people around the SEC, and Sankey said the other day there's no plans to touch the schedule. I don't understand the reluctance of allowing league teams to play 9 or 10 games. You get that way you get a better read on the best teams in the league. And what Saban is saying too is, now if everybody's playing that kind of schedule, if he were to play let's say a 10-game SEC schedule, and then he were to play a Louisville, and he were to play a Central Florida, okay, and say they lose a couple of games, but they still win their division and still win the SEC championship, they would go to the playoffs. I mean, the committee would look more kindly at a 1-loss or 2-loss team in terms of a playoff if you played that kind of schedule all the way through. And I think from an attendance standpoint, I think from a television rating standpoint and all that, it just makes sense to play more top flight games, even though you run the risk of a nick or two here or there on your schedule.
I just think, looking at this way, Corn, I want to see a standardized formula across all the conferences, at least the power conferences. I want to see an even amount of teams, and I almost want to see these teams, almost like they do in the NFL, kind of hook up with each other and kind of almost have a little non-conference schedule, agreement against each other, and have it go by, order of finish the previous year, and maybe see some sort of intrigue that way. Because, from that regard, especially if we're talking about the top 5 or top 4 conferences, I think, we could all agree the future of the Big 12 is murky. If you put the rest of the Big 12 across the scraps, at least in the other top 4 conferences, you get 16 in each, and then you go into some sort of non-conference scheduling agreement where 2 of them pair up every year. In my mind, that creates a much more standardized format and also makes the selection of the college football playoff easier.
Well, I don't disagree with you. Anything that would eliminate the games against FCS opponents, I just think that's a waste of time. I don't think that does anybody any good. It really doesn't put a lot of money into the pockets of the smaller teams. I mean, you look at the payouts that Furman and Citadel, when they play the in-state teams, USC, Clemson, they're not getting a big payday. They're getting a couple of 100,000, 300,000 maybe. That's not big in today's world of college football. I mean, it's a supplement to those programs, and I understand that. But then, they run the risk if they're in a situation. Let's say the Citadel's having a great year, and they're in the running for the Southern Conference Championship, or they're going to be in the FCS playoffs. Then they got to go play Alabama the week before the playoffs begin. It was like Coastal Carolina playing USC a couple of years ago, and after the first quarter, Coach Mowgli, he took his guys out. They were getting beat badly anyway. He didn't want to get his starters hurt, and he had the playoffs coming up. To me, that's ripping off the paying customer.
Well, the big key is, and I'm not going to knock Saban for what he's done, but Saban is used to having guys come off the end of the bench who can play for other people. He has superior depth than everybody else. If you look at the Atlantic Coast Conference, for instance, in football, one of the problems they have, as far as the other teams, not Clemson, is that the quality depth isn't there. So say a Duke is having a great season, and then a couple of their top linemen get hurt, and then suddenly they lose in 3 or 4 ball games because they just don't have the depth to reload. I think some of the reticence of some of the coaches who's never had the luxury of Alabama's depth don't want to play a lot of tough teams they don't have to because they're afraid that they're going to lose by attrition.
All right, let me drop in a couple of quick recruiting notes before we hit the top of the hour break here on Sports Talk. Coming up at the top of the hour, Clemson target cornerback Jaden Davis of Fort Lauderdale is set to make his commitment announcement. He took officials to Oklahoma, Penn State, and Kentucky. He's also considering Miami, and, of course, he's considering Clemson. And Clemson is in the running for defensive end Colby Wooden of Lawrenceville, Georgia. It's Clemson and Auburn. Right now, August 16th is when he plans to announce at his school the day before his season opener. He's in regular contact with the Tigers, with Venables and Lemansky Hall, and also with Dabo Sweeney. And he's undecided, kind of going back and forth between the two at this point. And it really could go either way for him as he tries to make his decision. He is one of the better defensive end prospects in Georgia, and a guy that Clemson has been recruiting very hard and covets for this class. And so we'll keep a close watch on that and see what he decides to do. He was last at Auburn on June 2nd. He was at Clemson the last time back in April for the spring game. He's visited both schools 5 times, so it's going to be a real tough call for him to decide between the two group of Tigers there. All right, break is coming up here at the top of the hour on Sports Talk. We've got more for you from here at SEC Media Days, ACC Media Days in Charlotte. We'll be back. I'll reopen. Let's see here. What do we got? All here and recap the day here and preview tomorrow, and we'll shift gears toward the C and the piece with RUITP. I'm gonna walk away for a moment and I'll be back.
All right.
We solid? We can stay connected, can't we?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. All right, I'm here.
All right.
Still solid.
Still good. Still good.
You got Jeremy Pruitt standing by. Have him ready. We'll
All right.
drop him in this segment. Keller
245, just to let you know.
Keller Christ. Jared Garantano. Keller Christ. Ty Chandler. Marquez Callaway. Well,
Will said there's a story out of North Carolina. Some guys could be suspended.
Who from at Chapel Hill?
Yeah, Chapel Hill.
Hey, tell him when we bring him in, he can bring that up. Samaglia. Something Kongbo.
Round 2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show, 800-956-7266.
Okay, we're back at Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Hope you've had a great day back in the good old Palmetto State. We've had a good day here in Atlanta. It's day 3 of SEC Media Days is behind us. One more day to go. We had 4 more coaches come through today. We'll have the last 3 coaches coming in tomorrow. You heard from Nick Saban coming up. We're going to hear from Jeremy Pruitt, the new coach at Tennessee. You know, it's hard to believe. It's been 20 years since Tennessee last won an SEC championship. 20 years for a program like Tennessee. 1998 was their last SEC championship season. Hard to believe. Missouri came through today with Barry Odom, and he brought 3 of his players, and including the quarterback, and we'll hear from him coming up. And we had Mississippi State in as well today. Joe Moorhead, the first-year coach, not on USC's schedule this year, so we're not worrying too much with the Bulldogs this time around. Before we get to the comments from the new Tennessee coach, though, Will is at ACC Media Days. Now, you guys had the Coastal guys in today, so that's who you were dealing with. The Atlantic guys will be in tomorrow. And you were saying during the break we got some other news coming out of Chapel Hill?
Yeah, it's funny how this comes out after North Carolina speaks, but this is a report coming from the TV station WRAL here in North Carolina, and according to their report, multiple football players from the UNC football team could be suspended 1 game or more following self-reported NCAA violations. Kids are alleged to have basically selling their university-issued shoes and athletic gear. WRAL has confirmed the story with multiple UNC athletic department officials, including a person in the football program. They self-reported these violations in February, and it was processed as a secondary violation by the NCAA in March. Suspensions, of course, pending the results of the NCAA investigation. They don't know exactly who could be suspended or the prominence of the players, but obviously the fact that this is coming out must mean that there could be somebody of prominence that could possibly be missing for a game or more.
Wait a minute. So you're telling me at the State University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, the flagship university in the state of North Carolina, that you can be suspended for a game, maybe two, for selling some of your gear and profiting from that, yet you can take completely bogus, made-up, fake, fraudulent classes, get grades for them to stay eligible and help your team win national championships and not miss a second?
Corn, I'm just hoping they don't. Corn, I'm just hoping they don't cut my line here, man. Don't kill the messenger.
Oh, okay. No, the only thing I do is I keep getting this visual of an elementary school teacher, a female, a little bit older, with a ruler in her hand, getting ready to rap UNC again on the knuckles. Don't do that again.
I mean, good gracious, man. This is
seem incongruous. It does seem incongruous.
It just doesn't fit. I mean, okay, I understand that what they did here is wrong, and they're going to, face the music. But then, what about the other stuff? What about the real important stuff that you did and that you got away with, and that you have been shining your trophies off the sweat of people who should not have been eligible? Yeah, don't get me started, as you already have. All right, back here to the SEC. I want to mention too that tomorrow, of course, South Carolina will be here. Finally, Will Muschamp is the last coach to speak. In my memory, I can't remember ever having the South Carolina coach being the last coach to speak. It maybe has happened before, but Muschamp will be the last coach to get into the big room tomorrow. He is scheduled to speak at around 11:40. Prior to that, at 10:30, the South Carolina media is going to get with him, so we'll have that early for you. And I'm not expecting any major news. I mean, a couple of things are hanging out there. For example, you got a safety who was suspended because of charges against him. Those charges, I'm not even sure if they've moved forward, because the woman allegedly involved here has said that Javon Charleston did nothing, did no wrong. So we'll see if Muschamp has anything to report on that. And there's also one recruit who is still hanging out there, Tyquan Johnson, still hanging out there in terms of qualifying and trying to get into school for this season. We'll get an update on that. Any injury situations that need to be updated, he'll talk on that as well. So we'll have that for you early in terms of the coverage. That'll be a little bit after 10:30, and then he'll go in front of the main room at about 11:40, and then he'll make the rounds, and the players will make the rounds, and we'll have coverage for you on our website, SportsTalkSC.com, and on Twitter at SportsTalkSC, and of course tomorrow night on Sports Talk right here from Atlanta, or possibly I could be back in Columbia if I get out of here quickly enough. But today, one of the coaches who came through, Jeremy Pruitt from Tennessee. The guy's got 5 national championship rings as a defensive coach. But he's taking over a program that is used to great success, but has been in the doldrums for several, now going on decades. So today, his message to the media was he is there to make Tennessee a winner again.
For me, when I chose to go to Tennessee and our staff chose to go to Tennessee, our number one goal is to build a championship program. To do that, it takes commitment and it takes resources. When you talk about commitment, you can look at the Tennessee fan base. I've been all over the state. I've been all over the Southeast. The passion, you can feel it. We're hungry. They're hungry. Everybody's hungry. We're excited to get started. We're excited to get this era started, and can't wait to do it. When you talk about facilities, our facilities there, the plan that's been in place, just in the last 6 months, we have added a practice facility, an extra practice field. We have redone our weight room, And we have also redone the Anderson Center. So when you talk about commitment, you got to have the resources to do it. I think it starts at the top. It starts with our athletic director, Philip Fulmer. A lot of people ask questions. What's it like working with Coach Fulmer? Well, the easiest way to look at it is this. If you told me that I was going to be the head coach at Tennessee and I could choose who the athletic director was going to be, I would choose Coach Fulmer. Coach Fulmer was a player there. He was an assistant coach. He's a championship head coach at Tennessee. So all the things that helped make Tennessee great, he knows what it took to get there. When there was a bump in the road, he probably knows the things that can help steer me away from it. I'm thankful that I have an opportunity of, hey, if I have some questions, because I'm going to tell you something. Whatever you do, when I talk about football all the time being a developmental game, it's the same thing, same way for coaches. I'm sure 10 years from now I'll be a better head coach than I will be this fall. So the good part of that for me is if I have any questions, I got a guy that I can walk 30 feet down the hall and lean on him. So I think that he's going to expedite this process to help us get to being a championship program again. The power of the T. The T's power. The T represents power. You know, for our guys, the opportunities that exist with the people that are associated with the University of Tennessee once football is over with. I've been to Memphis, Nashville, Chattanooga, Bristol, Knoxville, Atlanta, Georgia, Charlotte, North Carolina, Huntington, West Virginia, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Everywhere I've been, I have seen and felt the power of the T. And I'm honored to have a chance to represent the University of Tennessee, and we're excited to get this season going.
All right, Jeremy Pruitt, some of his comments before the media today here in Atlanta. And, you know, I've talked about guys after listening to some of the coaches and players and reading up on some of the other teams on USC's schedule and kind of changing my mind a little bit about how USC might do. Not here with Tennessee. I still feel very strongly that South Carolina is going to finish ahead of Tennessee.
Jeremy Pruitt almost kind of sounds like he's trying to convince himself than he is convinced the rest of the media. And, you know, the power of the T might be something. I kind of feel like Tennessee might have a case of low T when they take.
What I want to see is the level of wear on the carpet between his office and Philip Fulmer's. Because I believe he's going to be going down there a lot.
You know, they have a transfer quarterback from Stanford in Keller Christ, and he might get in there and change things up for them a little bit offensively. But it is not a team loaded with talent, not the kind of talent we're used to seeing in Tennessee. All right, we'll be right back. More sports talk in a moment. We get out clean?
Yeah, we're good.
I couldn't hear the music at all, though. Was the music playing?
Yeah, it was playing.
Yeah. Well, you're very low, too. Why are you so low in my headset?
I was not low T. I was sitting away from the mic.
Okay. Yeah, I'm watching the clock, and so we're right on. So I'm right on with you. All right, we want to call Coach here.
Call Fisher DeBerry.
Yeah, I'd wait about 2 minutes. You take it. You take it. Reset. No. Reset. And then I'll go to Coach DeBerry. Well, bloody puta. Will's going to bring it back. You got Coach?
Oh, no, hold on.
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network from ACC and SEC's media dueling days. It's SEC, of course, continuing in Atlanta through tomorrow. We'll hear from the South Carolina Gamecocks there. You'll hear from the Clemson Tigers and the rest of the Atlantic foes here coming up on Sports Talk Thursday and across our coverage on Twitter at SportsTalkSC and at SportsTalkSC.com. Later on in the program, we'll hear from Missouri head coach Barry Odom and the comments he made at the SEC main room in Atlanta, and also my conversation with Georgia Tech head coach Paul Johnson as the Clemson Tigers take on a very, very intriguing Georgia Tech ball club in one of their opening ACC road games in Atlanta. Coming up, though, of course, we will talk, of course, with Fisher DeBerry, and we want to let you know we're brought to you by Founders Federal Credit Union. This is big. For a limited time, Founders Federal Credit Union, a 5-year certificate now at its highest rate. Don't miss your chance. Visit foundersfcu.com or an office to apply. Colin, you have the coach.
Indeed, we do. You know, we're doing nothing but talking about and talking to coaches here in Atlanta and in Charlotte. And why not reach out elsewhere to talk some football with a very famous coach in our state and in the country, Fisher DeBerry, a South Carolina kid who did well, went out and made it big in college football. And now coach is still giving back. He's given back his entire life, and now he is still giving back to youth and to football programs and to coaches through his South Carolina Coaches for Charity, the 9th annual gathering of the South Carolina Coaches for Charity coming up on Tuesday in Greenville at the TD Convention Center. Coach, this thing has gotten so big, you've had to move from hotel ballrooms now to a convention center.
Well, we're excited about that, and we're expecting a great crowd, and it's going to be a fun night, Phil. And the great thing is you're going to be the master of ceremonies.
Well, I'm going to be working with Rick Henry once I get off the show. Rick's going to handle it early, then I'm going to step in there and do what I can in the second half for you guys. I always enjoy being there. I'm glad this year, for a couple of years I have not been able to be there because of the scheduling wasn't good, but it's worked out well for us. And you're going to have Dabo Sweeney, you're going to have Will Muschamp, Buddy Pugh, Brent Thompson, Clay Hendricks, Josh Conklin. You welcome in a new coach, new head coach in the state, and Josh Conklin. And I know you love bringing all these guys together to talk football, but also to let them talk about one of their favorite charities.
Well, that's what it's all about. It's a night of charity, a night of giving back, as you said, and I think the fans will really have a great time talking, with the coaches prior to the event and mingling. And, but I just have the greatest respect in the world for our coaches in South Carolina. You've been busy this week, and they're busy this week with all these media gatherings, and to take time off for preparation for the upcoming season and come together in unison for charity and for different charities and the difference they're going to make in the lives of a lot of people in this state. It just sends volumes about the quality and the character of the coaches that we have leading programs in this great state. And certainly we're excited that you're going to be there and that Rick is going to be there. And you've gone a long way from Atlanta, South Carolina, my friend.
Well, you haven't done too bad yourself coming from Cheraw, I believe. So, we both grew up drinking PD River water, so must be something in the fluids there.
I guarantee you we had some good time down on the banks of the PD growing up, didn't we?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. We're talking with Fisher DeBerry. And let's don't forget now, proceeds from this as well go to kids across the state of South Carolina, helping us sending kids from single parent situations to FCA summer camps. I got to believe that you create a lot of happiness and a lot of smiles for kids across the state by doing that.
Well, Phil, that's what it's all about. And, of course, our foundation, like you say, is for helping single-parent kids have opportunities. And something that's very dear to Luann and my heart is summer camps and particularly summer FCA football. And we send a lot of kids to FCA football camps, and we think this benefits football in South Carolina. But we know if we can get them to the camps, and they'll be with the right kind of people, and they'll hear a lot about leadership and character development and integrity, and certainly have a chance to learn a lot about the game and improve their skills. And then, most importantly, go back, and if they can make a decision for their lives and go back into their schools, they can have a tremendous impact upon changing the heart and soul of a lot of high schools across this state. And we feel it just can make a great deal of difference in a kid's life and certainly in a school life. And that's what we're all about as far as our foundation is concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been that way ever since you put a whistle around your neck. And so let's talk football with you for just a moment. And you can't go into a football season anymore without people speculating about the future of the sport. Where do you think we're headed with football 10, 15, 20 years down the road?
Well, I tell you, it's really questionable. I think it's a great time in college football. That the game is better and greater than it's ever been. Athletes, are so talented, and but it seems like it's an arms race, and sometimes we lose sight of what the game is all about and what it was created to do and what it's supposed to do for the universities, and it just seems to be that we just trying to outdo each other, and recruiting sometimes is taken in an ugly hit. Sometimes the integrity part of it, the credibility, the loyalty that's in college athletics today really concerns me an awful lot, because you got to win and you got to produce and you got to raise money. And sometimes, again, we just lose a little bit of the focus on the game. But what a wonderful game it is, and what a great thing that we have here in South Carolina, with the quality of people that are leading our programs and the quality of coaches that they are and how they understand the game.
Do you like what they're doing with the rules, trying to eliminate, of course, the spearing, the hits up around the shoulder and above, the chopping of the knees, taking that out so that a charging lineman can avoid maybe having his knees blown out, things that they're trying to do to protect players better and try to avoid the lawsuits and the injuries that can sometimes be life-changing and life-threatening.
Well, you're exactly right, and but the game really is as safe as I think it's ever been. I mean, you stop and think about the equipment you and I played with, and kids, of course, are bigger today. They're faster, they're stronger, but yet at the same time, they're wearing apparel and equipment that is the finest that's ever been made, and it's been tested so much. And but I think, having served on the rules committee for 6 years, whenever I was actively coaching, I can appreciate the attitude of the coaches and the committees, in college football, are trying to protect the player, and certainly we want to continue to do that. And we have to be concerned about that. But, yeah, I think, not blocking below the waist, but cutting after 5 yards down the field is certainly, I think the open field is certainly a very, very good rule. The transfer rule that we're making, and a lot of it's going to be challenging to see how this plays out, but I think it can be beneficial to the athlete in a lot of respects. But I just hope it doesn't get to the place of where a kid, if he goes to a school and gets a little disgruntled and things not exactly like he thought he was and going to be, and the way he told it was going to be, and sometimes just want to take the easy way out and go somewhere else. I don't think that's the intent of the rule in any way. And so certainly hope that we don't get in that direction. But I think the game is greater than it's ever been and more exciting than it's ever been. Of course, that's pretty evident by the number of people that are going on Saturday all across the country to see college football.
Hey, Coach, always great talking to you, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
I can't wait, Phil. I know it's going to be a great event. I can't wait to see all the coaches, and I know they are very, very excited about it. And one thing we're going to do this year we hadn't done before, each coach is going to play. Not only is he going to recognize the most valuable community service in his community, but also he's going to bring
Coach,
one of his
I
players.
gotta jump in for a hard break, and we'll be right back. Thank you, Coach DeBerry.
All right.
It was going great, and he had to sneak in that last comment.
Had another paragraph.
It was I mean, I had it. I even stopped my questions early, knowing he was going to go kind of long there. And try to sneak in at the last mention. You got him clean, didn't you?
Yeah, he got clean.
Okay. Thanks, Coach.
He's going to Odom, right?
No, I think we're doing. I think Will's got a pre-recorded thing. I think we're doing Paul Johnson here. Or maybe not. Hang on. Always sorry to cut in there, but we were up against a break. Let's see next week. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, bum, bum.
Who's bringing it back? You or Will?
He's going to bring it back, but let me check with him. Don't you want to do? Okay. Okay, Will, okay. You want to Johnson here if he's like 8 minutes? How we sounding? Still solid?
Yeah, still solid.
Has this guy not committed yet? For crying out loud. Live via Twitter. That's Sleeper Athletes. Well, I don't see that you're live. Unless I got to click on something. Oh, maybe I'm looking at the wrong thing here. Well, I think I had it right. Oh, maybe I don't have the latest up there. Watch the St. Thomas. Oh, now they moved it to 8 p.m. Oh, the ESPYs are going on tonight. I never watch the ESPYs, even though I probably should, especially since Danica Patrick is the MC at. You get that, Brian? MC at?
Yeah, I got you.
That means if she's there, that must mean A-Rod would be in the audience.
Welcome back, Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network, as we sit now in the dwindling Westin Hotel in Charlotte. One of the only broadcasts going on right now. In fact, I think we're the only one that's left going on right now. Last man standing here in our little estate here. Again, we'll have the Atlantic Division coaches coming up tomorrow. We'll hear from Paul Johnson closer to the end of the show. One of course, Clemson's big opponents. I wanted to read this tweet, Corn, that we got on the Larry Fedora comments. This is from Walter. He tweets us at SportsTalkSC. Chronic traumatic hashtag CTE symptoms, memory loss, confusion, impaired judgment, impulse control problems, just to name a few. Does that sound like Fedora?
I know.
So
a lot of people were tweeting that kind of stuff at him today as that stuff was coming out. So it's just
would you not
crazy. And now you got this thing coming out of Chapel Hill tonight about players getting suspended. And you're right. I'm sure that was delayed until after they got out of Charlotte. It's typical of how that stuff works. By the way, I want to mention that Jaden Davis, he pushed his commitment back to 8 o'clock tonight. So it has not happened yet. About 25 minutes away. Cornerback out of St. Thomas, Clemson, is on his short list. So I haven't heard a lot of from the Clemson internet people, haven't heard a lot of vibe from them that they think they're going to get this cat. So a lot of people think it's going to be Oklahoma for him, but we shall see coming up in just a little bit. And yeah, we'll hear more from you. And I want to warn anybody too. You said you got Paul Johnson coming up?
Yes.
Yeah. Anybody who's listening to us at that time, if you're driving, I suggest you pull over to the side of the road in case you doze off while listening to that interview.
That's not. Come on. Why you gotta dog a guy like that?
Paul Johnson is drier than a 4-olive martini. I mean, seriously, the guy has never cracked a smile nor a joke in his entire coaching career. He's a great coach. Don't get me wrong, but he's painful to listen to.
Navy now, Corn. I mean, come on. You can't dog somebody who is helped at least in an ancillary way serving our armed forces.
I'm saying he's an excellent coach. He's just boring to listen to, kind of like Barry Odom. No, actually, Barry was pretty energetic today, representing Missouri. Missouri coming in, and they finished up last year. I know you cited the weakness of the schedule down the stretch, and that is true. But they didn't just sneak by these people; they obliterated people down the stretch. And the kind of year that they got from Drew Lock was just amazing. 44 touchdown passes to only 13 interceptions, almost 4,000 passing yards. He was the all-SEC quarterback last season on a team that won 6 regular season games and went to a bowl game. And he, we'll let you hear from the coach right now. And the thing that he kind of shared with us today was just and he's an alum. He's a former Tiger player, of course. And he was just sharing his excitement and his enthusiasm about what they're doing around Missouri to make their program first class.
After a tough start to the year, and I've said it a number of times, I wouldn't recommend anybody starting out 1-5. That's not a lot of fun or healthy for anybody. But we were getting close, and we didn't play. We didn't play very well on Saturday afternoon or Saturday nights for 3.5 hours. We weren't playing consistent enough to win a football game. We were doing some really good things at times, either offensively or defensively, but not really putting it together and playing smart football together. We were turning the ball over too much. We weren't getting it back near enough defensively. We weren't playing consistent. But our guys stayed the course. They stayed. Our practice habits were pretty darn good. Our preparation leading up to the games, things were trending in the right direction. I knew we were close. The emotional side of that evening after that game, our players see that side of me often, and I've usually fairly reserved in a setting with media and don't show that side of me, but that's more of my personality. I thought at that point in the season, at the time that they needed to see that, I needed to stand up for them a little bit publicly. Because I knew we were getting close. I knew we were going to continue to get better. And if we could just hold tight together and continue to show the family that we knew that we had in our locker room, that knew we had on our football field and in the classroom, and things that we were doing collectively together, then we were going to have a chance. But if we fractured at any moment and we didn't show togetherness, then obviously we would have fell apart from there. So I credit to them. I'll remember, and lessons learned always, but I'll remember that group on on some of the things that were done that next week. Even though we didn't win the next game, we played better. We played better the next week, and then started playing with a little more confidence. And luckily and fortunately for them, there was some success that came because of the work that they put in. I think with Drew, you know, he is as physically of a talented quarterback as there is in the country. I'm really happy he's my quarterback and our quarterback. There'll be a lot of comparisons and looking at stats and numbers and all the different things that we were able to do offensively the last couple of years. And I give Coach Heupel credit. He did a great job, and he'll do a great job in his new position. When we knew that position we were going to open up, and I talked to a number of guys. I talked to a number of people that I was interested in leading our offense. We got 10 returning starters back on offense. Obviously, for Drew to play well, we need him to play well, but we need 10 guys around him to play better than they did a year ago. Our line of scrimmage with the offensive line coming back, and Brad Davis is coaching them and doing a great job. All 5 of those guys started about every game last year, so there's a collective group there. So we've got a good, strong foundation of what we're going to be offensively. But when we hired Derek, I wanted to make sure that we were able to maintain some of the things that we've done with success the last couple of years. But also as a head coach, there were things that I wanted to move to offensively that gave us a chance in either third downs or red zone or second and short, the different situations you get in football on some different ways to play. The tempo is always going to be there for us. We'll play times as fast as we can play. There'll be times that we vary the huddle and the speed of how we're going to attack the line of scrimmage and how we're going to play. So Derek really hit every check mark for me on what I wanted in that position. He also, because he was a head coach in this league, it's been good for me to be able to bounce some things off of him, just like the rest of my staff. And he's sit in the chair. He's been in some of those opportunities to make decisions, learn from some things he did right and learn from some things that he didn't do right. And I'm appreciative of the approach that he's taken. The thing with Derek, once he got the job and stepped on campus, I admire the way that he approached building relationship with our kids. And he dove right in and hasn't one day thought that he's got all the answers. He's reached out and learned and built it together. And I'm excited to see how we keep moving that forward in the fall.
Okay, Barry Odom, and he's talking about Derek Dooley, of course, who he hired to be his new offensive coordinator. And, of course, he lost Josh Heupel, who became the head coach at Central Florida. And so I know that was a hire that you were particularly excited about, Will, to see that Derek Dooley was coming in to run the offense.
I find that to be, again, this is the thing. You know, Derek Dooley has never called plays in his life at any level. I just, in my mind, I feel like they were never going to get the kind of guy like Josh Heupel was. I mean, Josh Heupel came in highly recommended out of Oklahoma, and of course, came in as a highly regarded offensive guru. That's why he got the job that he got as a head coach. I just feel like they went out and hired the only guy who has name recognition that was available. I mean, and in my mind, you know, I wonder how they'll be able to sustain things defensively also. That's a big concern if you're them. And the one thing you have to think about is that, you know, South Carolina quarterbacks have had pretty good history against Missouri. See Shaw, Connor. I mean, and Bentley and South Carolina put up 31 on them. I mean, you talk about all the points that they put up on Idaho, Connecticut, Florida, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, and the dead men walking. Georgia hung half 100 on them. Kentucky hung 40 on them. Auburn hung half 100 on them. And that was basically the rant that Barry Odom talked about in the opening there of his comments, where he made that rant that basically came out and really was directed more at the media, saying we're going to get this thing right. You know, in my mind, Missouri has got a tough road. They got to go to Alabama. They got to go to Florida. They got to go to Purdue, a team they lost to last year. I mean, I look at them and I still see a team that, you know, is middling around 500 overall. I don't know if they contend for the East.
Well, they got a quarterback and they got some weapons with him.
It's great. And he'll look great in the National Football League. He'll look great in the National Football League.
They do have to improve the defense, but if you can score in this league in this day and time, you got a chance. Be right back. It's been a fast show. All right. This is. How can a basketball player still consider changing his class to 2018 this late? What are all these basketball recruiting guys going to do when the NCAA kills summer basketball recruiting next summer? Huh? I'm just wondering out loud.
Get summer jobs?
Nah. Kofi Cockburn, 6'10", 300. Is he a 2019 or 2020 guy? He's a 2019 kid. Carolina's got about as much chance of getting him as I do flying a plane.
All right, I got to use your pot to play some intro music, so don't say anything, okay?
I'll mute myself.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
Welcome back, Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network, as we come to you from the ACC Media Kickoff. It's our pleasure to be joined by Georgia Tech football coach Paul Johnson, who joins us here to kind of kick things off. And, Coach, I know that last year, disappointing 5-6 record for you. What are you looking to correct, and what have you tried to correct from spring all the way through the summer and getting in here to the fall before we start here in a week and a half?
Right. Well, like any season, we were disappointed with the record a year ago. I think that, we got to do a better job finishing the games. There were 4 games that we lost that we were up by 2 scores. Mm-hmm. And, that's part on the offense, part on the defense. We've just got to finish. Offensively, you got to keep scoring. And defensively, you got to get some key stops.
It's weird because, looking at some of your games and looking at the schedule and even seeing some of the way that those games broke down, I mean, you have 5 wins, but you're 4 points away from 8.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can never go back, but we go back early in the year to the Miami game, and we've got them 4th and 15 with under a minute, and we're up, and they throw a ball that bounces off our DB's head into a guy laying on the ground on his back. And that was just kind of the way the season went. It was like if we could find a way to lose a close game, we did. And, hopefully that'll balance out for us.
I know with your team, a lot of people talk about and focus on your style of play. How has your style of play evolved over the course of the years? Because, everybody evolves, everybody changes,
right.
and obviously the way the game has become more spread, I'm sure your option has got more spread to it.
All right. Well, we've always been spread, and the base of what we do offensively is very similar to what we did in 1985, but there's always wrinkles. If people give you trouble with certain things, you try to find answers for them, and through the years you evolve and you do some of that. But, for the most part, we're pretty much basic with the same way we started in 85.
Of course, we're talking with Paul Johnson, head coach at Georgia Tech. Taquan Johnson, of course, or Taquan Marshall, excuse me, the obviously focal point of your offense, your starting quarterback, coming into a very big senior season for him. What have you noticed from him in his maturation and his leadership?
Well, I think he's worked hard in the offseason, and certainly he needs to be more efficient throwing the ball. But we got 9 returning starters on offense, so we're excited about that if we can get them all to the gate healthy.
Of course, looking at the Coastal as a whole, looking at your team, kind of where you match up against them, what are some of the things that you point out? What are some of the teams you point out as far as teams that you feel like you can get an advantage on, things you might have trouble with going in?
I think you just got to take each game one at a time. And, the conference is tough. You have to play well to win the thing. But, I was looking, I think the last 10 years it's probably been Virginia Tech's won 4, we've won 3, and the other teams have 1 each. So, we should be there at the end this year again. I think we have a chance to compete for it.
Yeah, it's honestly, if you look at one of the divisions, the Atlantic, it's probably a lot of people think that it's almost said and done that it's Clemson's, but with yours, it's wide open. Where do you think the parity is, and where do you think the parity has come from in your division? Just because it seems like every year it almost seems like a toss-up.
Well, I think actually that's happened a little bit, but if you really look at the Coastal, and like I said, the last 10 years, Virginia Tech's won 4 and Georgia Tech's won 3.
Right.
So, I'm not sure that if you took Clemson and Florida State, it's probably close to 5-5 there or whatever. So there's really not as much difference as people would think. The last couple of years, Clemson has been so dominant that they really haven't had much of a challenge over on the other side.
Of course, looking at the game you guys played last year, a real slogfest against the Tigers, 24-10 matchup at Death Valley. You get them in your building next year, and you've won 6 in a row at Bobby Dodd. And how much, I guess, does what you guys do, whether it's offensively or defensively, how does that play into your home success?
Well, I don't know that it does any more than having a home game. Certainly Clemson's probably the most talented team in the league, and they've had a great run. But I think our guys believe that they can win that game because we have won some games. Since I've been at Georgia Tech, I think it's now 5-6, so it's pretty close to being balanced. They've kind of defended their turf, and we've kind of defended ours. So, it'll be a huge challenge to play them with their defensive front and their personnel. But they're always going to have good players. They always do.
Paul Johnson joining us here. And funny, listening to Commissioner Swampert this morning, he talked about how expansion has kind of changed the league and increased the footprint of the league. Where is the league now from the time you joined it and obviously the time you joined at Georgia Tech?
Well, there's no question from 10 years ago when I came in, the league's so much better top to bottom. I think that the teams at the top have gotten better. And then the teams at the bottom have certainly gotten better. There used to be a handful of teams that you could kind of count on as wins, and now for us anyway, if we don't have our A game, everybody in the league can beat us. So it's much tougher than it used to be.
Who are you looking for to step up for you on defense? You talked about that earlier.
Well, we've got returning linebackers. Brant Mitchell's a 3-year starter. He's a captain over there. Victor Alexander, We'll be playing outside linebacker in the new scheme. Our defensive linemen have played. We've got some starters back, Henri St. Amour, some guys. So, I'm anxious to watch our defense play and see what happens this fall.
Of course, we're talking with Paul Johnson, head coach at Georgia Tech, joining us here on Sports Talk. Going in, like you mentioned, the records over the past couple of years, what do you think is the biggest challenge that your team will have to overcome in order to do what it's supposed to do this year in your mind?
Well, I think we just got to get back. I mean, 2 years ago, we won 9 games.
Mm-hmm.
4 years ago, we won 11. So it's, if you cherry pick the numbers, you can say, well, 2 of the last 3, but then if you add another one, you go to an 11-win season. So we just got to get back to playing. We got a tough schedule. We got to take it one game at a time, and we got to finish. We got to win some of these one-possession games.
Is there anything to that seesaw, or is it just luck of the draw?
No, I've been a head coach for 22 years, and I think we've had 3 losing seasons in 22 years. So a lot of it has to do with schedule. A lot of it has to do with injuries, and some of it has to do with just luck.
The coach of Georgia Tech, Paul Johnson. Thanks so much for the time. I appreciate it.
All right, you have a good one.
That's Paul Johnson, and I would say that as good a Paul Johnson as you're going to get, Corn.
Well, yeah, he's a good one. But I tell you what, Corn,
did you give him a cup of coffee or something? Did you give him an espresso or something before that interview?
He was fine. He looked. I was one of the last ones he did. It's weird. Anytime these coaches go through this, I do feel for them a little bit, because by the end of the day, when we get to see them, a lot of times they've been kind of run through the ringer and run ragged. And the same thing is true with the SEC room as well.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. Let me mention one thing here real quick. I want to just make sure I'm correct on this. Missouri won 7 games last year, 7 regular season games. They did not win their bowl games. So I want to make sure I got that right. 7 regular season games. What's his name? Locke said today, he was asked about, as he was making the rounds, he was asked about coming back to play in Columbia, South Carolina. And he's told the story about having a bottle thrown at him, a bottle of water thrown at him 2 years ago. And he opened it up and drank it. And he said he won't do that again. If he's expecting more water bottles to come his way, he will not drink it.
Well, again, fulfilling the stereotype that was, of course, created after the Clemson contest.
Well, the thing about it is, if somebody throws a ball, they know if he takes a sip out of it, they'll put something in it this time. So he wants to be careful.
It might not be water this time. It could be moonshine.
And Paul Johnson says he has the same system since 1985, but they put a few wrinkles in it. Well, all of those wrinkles haven't worked against Brent Venables, because if anybody can stop that option, it's been Brent Venables. Because of that defensive line, they just get instant penetration against Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech has no answer for it.
All right, so here tomorrow at SEC Media Days, we wrap it up. In fact, they're making the guys on Radio Row shut down by 2 o'clock tomorrow, because the Atlanta soccer team has got something going on here. Not going to impact us. USC, Vanderbilt, and Auburn, we'll have that covered for you, both on the website, SportsTalkSC.com, on Twitter at SportsTalkSC, on the show tomorrow night. We'll have coverage of Clemson and the other Atlantic Division teams from Charlotte tomorrow as ACC Media Day continues. Thank you, Pro. Thank you, Will. And Brian, thank you for putting it all together once again. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow night on Sports Talk. Dadgummit, if I didn't maybe go a second long. Did I get out in time?
Yeah, you did. Hold on a second. Let me shut all the audio stuff down.
Okay. Huh. Well, I didn't take it waste any time. He committed to Oklahoma. Damn it.
Are you still with me?
Yeah.